today we are going to discuss Donizetti's opera L'Elisir d'Amour, and we have discussed last week a little bit more in detail the life and work of this fabulous composer. On some of our slides today we are just summarizing a little bit, but we also, I intend to place today a lot of music for you under certain criteria where I want to kind of put your attention to certain elements while we are listening to some arias more than once, but different interpretations, and to compare a little bit. That's a lot of fun usually, and so I'm looking forward to get to this part of our tonight's session. If I spared you the whole list of all 66 operas, but just again to put this opera L'Elisir d'Amour in context, Anna Bolena was really the true breakthrough for Donizetti's international career, and so it was just a few years earlier. Anna Bolena was in many ways a change for him. Not only now he received commissions from Paris and Vienna, but also he was turning towards more dramatic type of operas. That was his preference. What's kind of interesting is that nevertheless he did continue writing a few comedies, and those comedies happen to be really the top hits in our list here. So La Fille de Régiment, Don Pasquale, and also L'Elisir d'Amour became the most liked works among those 66 operas. But in general, there was a shift after Anna Bolena, that he wrote more dramas. But L'Elisir d'Amour is definitely one of those operas which helped his international career. He modified it several times for performances in different parts of Europe to again make it fit the local taste, and was actually work before Lucia de Lammermoor. He himself described it as a melodrama giacoso. And I put here the term joyful drama, but if I show you here on the next slide, drama giacoso was actually a separate subgenre under the Italian operas. So usually we have opera seria, the serious operas, and we have the opera buffa, the comedies. And usually our composers kept very nicely those two genres separate. It started with Mozart's so-called Singspiele, where Mozart felt that opera had to be more true to real life, and that life never was one or the other only, and that you had to really combine the two. That life is just not so black and white. So he was very quickly adjusting to this new type of genre, which we call drama giacoso. So it's a joyful drama, and had a lot to do with the playwright Carlo Goldoni, who was very popular in Venice and made this type of opera popular. But it's really also Don Giovanni and Così fan tutte by Mozart, who were nowadays the main representatives. When we say drama giacoso, we immediately think of Don Giovanni, or at least I do. So it's very significant. There are different ways how to combine the comedies elements and the serious elements. I think the overall story you will see is has a serious undertone. We have in our roles, let me quick find all the roles to present to you. here. So we have Nemorino, who's the tenor part. It's a beautiful bel canto tenor part, and this particular role, Nemorino, goes back and forth between comedy elements and then some arias are very lyrical, romantic, and beautiful. Adina, also soprano bel canto part, which can go both ways. Belcore, the sergeant, is more a character, I would say, more comedy character than any. And Dr. Du Camara is the doctor traveling, well, doctor in parentheses, who is selling the l'elixir d'amour and knowingly sells just cheap red wine to the Nemorino, who is so deeply in love with Adina. And this role, for example, it's a bass role, but we commonly call this the basso buffo role. So he has this particular role in this play to be a comedy character. We see the same in Don Giovanni, where we have certain characters like Doña Elvira. There's nothing funny about Doña Elvira or Doña Anna in Don Giovanni. But then, or Don Octavio. There's other roles like Leporello, who is really giving this whole drama a Giacoso twist. And this is a little bit what Donizetti also practiced in this particular work, where certain characters have the function of bringing comedy to this opera. But Donizetti is also a composer who lived after Mozart, quite a few decades, so already this genre of drama Giacoso was more elaborate. We do see that in this opera he followed this type of layout that there are two very large acts with almost no scene changes. So everything is just playing around in the first act about this little plaza at the estate of Adina. I also should say that this is one of the so-called Ina roles. They are for many sopranos the type of roles we need a lot of virtuosity, the true bel canto quality in a soprano. And Anna Netrebko is this coming Saturday going to sing it at the Metropolitan Opera. Well, she got famous for singing the so-called Ina roles because there's several bel canto parts where the main character soprano role, the name ends with Ina, so Norina, Adina, etc. And Anna Netrebko is famous for these particular Ina roles and loves to sing them. Many of them are comedy roles, like in Don Pasquale. And she's just not quite yet ready to give up this bel canto Ina genre and to move to a more dramatic type of roles. So, but we will, I think this is one of the last times maybe we might see her in an Ina role, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. She has such a natural talent for this, especially the comedy elements. But back to our slide. The story of l'Elixir d'amour goes back to a very famous librettist, Eugene Scribe. If you go to Paris and you look at the old Paris building, there's several streets around the opera house which all are named after big legendary personalities of the Paris Opera. And there's one wrote Scribe because his librettos were for a certain period in music history, the first part of the 19th century, so popular. So this libretto was put before Donizetti already to music by Daniel Auber. was much less comedy in Ober's version of this opera. And I think Donizetti intended to make it this hybrid type of opera between opera buffa and opera seria. He was said to have written it in very quick haste. Some claim in 8 days. I saw other sources saying in 6 weeks. Neither one can be considered to be a long process when you know that Verdi sometimes took much more time for an opera. There are other opera composers like Wagner. It took him 25 years to complete The Ring. So it's 6 weeks still is very, very quickly writing. So we also have to recognize that in the opera repertoire, Donizetti's L'Elisir d'Amour is one of the most popular operas. There are several books which kind of rate operas, and for example, which opera is the most popular? I don't know. Do you have a guess? Which one do you think is the most popular? Yeah, just of all operas you can think of. Which one do you think?
La Bohème?
Yeah, but there's a dispute. There's 2 operas battling for that top number 1. It's actually Carmen. So Carmen and La Bohème, it goes back and forth. There's certain times where Carmen is more popular and others more La Bohème. Almost, it depends a little bit. I think there was a time with Mirella Freni and Pavarotti where it was just plain La Bohème. It depends who are the great singers of the time and what great recordings. But so when you consider all the great operas like Aida, Rigoletto, also the Verdi operas, and then Tosca, all the Puccini operas, to be as a bel canto opera, to be on number 12 sounds actually very, very high. One aria particularly became very famous, and we are going to hear it several times today because I do want to compare different interpretations. Una furtiva lacrima. And that's one of the very beautiful tenor romanzas in this opera. And you will be surprised that this aria was not part of the original libretto. Donizetti made quite a few changes to the libretto, and that was one of the additions he added to. So among all the 66 operas, in a certain time frame, in a period of 10 years, it was really the most played opera in all Italy. I think the reason why it's not anymore today is we still love bel canto, but not quite as passionately as people in 1938, where there was no Verdi yet much around. Nabucco was premiered in 1842, so it was really just at the beginning years of Verdi, and I think Wagner finished his first successful opera, Rienzi. But those were such beginning times for those later romantic composers that really they were overshadowed by Donizetti, and particularly by L'Elisir d'Amour. Just to give you an idea how popular this opera is, there are 91 recordings of L'Elisir d'Amour. I could have showed you, I mean, YouTube, just go on YouTube. I have no idea how many versions of Una furtiva lacrima you can find. There are so many. So I tried to kind of look for the ones which I thought were the most interesting ones. But what the sad thing is too, not all of those 91 recordings are anymore available. Recording companies are really nasty about those things. They literally have records only 5 years on the market, and can be one of the most beautiful recording. They just don't bother to reprint them and to put them back on the market. And nowadays with Apple iTunes, etc., nobody bothers. I know with my family they have over 100 recordings and you can barely find any. So it's a kind of a shame. Here you see a title page of the Preludio of l'Élysée d'Amour. And this particular page shows you, yes, it shows a certain flow. Yes, it could have been in haste. But it also shows how neatly this composer wrote. There is a little, here you can tell a little blot, but nevertheless, this must have been afterwards just a little blot on a piece of paper, so I'm not sure. Maybe this would be a nice moment to hear the first aria of this opera. Maybe let's start with the first romantic aria of the tenor, and just give me a certain moment. And here we are. Enjoy.
All guests have been muted.
Hello again, everybody. I hope you hear me again. And hello? Hello?
All guests have been unmuted.
Now, are you there?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. It's always this technology. So this was one example, and I also, if you go online, I put, of course, Pavarotti, the production we just saw, the first version, that was from this Vienna Staatsoper with Diego Flores, a recording from 2010. In my Lent classes, we are just watching the same production, but with Rolando Villazón, and also beautiful production. It has been at the Vienna Opera House since 2006. I'm very curious. Unfortunately, I cannot go. I have all Saturday class, but I cannot wait to hear from you what you will think about the new production of the Met of this particular opera. Yeah.
I'm forward.
So as I mentioned before, because this opera is a mixture between opera buffa and opera seria, there was, here I'm just actually on the slide elaborating a little bit more on this. But maybe what's important to remember is that in most of these type of operas, we have at least one basso buffo. In Don Giovanni, we have Don Giovanni is a baritone or bass, and then we have Leporello, a bass. But they are very different roles. Very few basses could sing both bass roles in Don Giovanni, because one is the typical basso buffo. Basso buffo is also in Don Pasquale. That's a typical basso buffo role. So we do see a certain character trait in this particular type of role. These are the particular changes this composer added to the libretto. So Una furtiva lacrima I already mentioned, but also an extra duet between Adina and Nemorino in the first act to also kind of emphasize the plot and the love quarrel between the two. So Nemorino is always showing his love to Adina, and she just doesn't pay attention to him. And only in the process of the opera she sees how far this composer goes just to get her attention. And we do see some some final words at the end of the opera change. You have to think Donizetti was such a great man of the theater. He knew the flow and what it took really for this composer to be very effective with his different works. Altogether, the Ober version was less opera buffa elements and more romantic, and in Donizetti he made it a real, more actually comedy than drama, and with all the elements of a buffa opera. Also, usually in Italian opera you had the grand solo arias. He is starting actually a new trend in the 19th century where he said, well, a duet can be as beautiful and as virtuous and as meaningful in the flow of an opera as a solo aria. And we see this in La Bohème, our favorite opera. The first time we see Mimi on stage, it's actually in the beautiful grand duet with Rodolfo. And that's very significant trend we see in many operas. Just we had the Zarzuela, Luisa Fernanda. Almost the first act is a series of duets where the composer introduces all the main characters very quickly, and duets let you introduce very quickly the relationship between the main characters. So in Luisa Fernanda, it's one duet, two duets, three duets just in a row, and it really shows the triangle between the main characters. We do hear different stories about, well, last week I told you that in order to get away from Bergamo and the control of his father, Donizetti, as a young man, enlisted in the army, and he was stationed in Venice. Venice is the city where he absorbed a lot Italian opera, and he wrote his first two operas in Venice, one of which became already very famous. I came across that he just was allowed to leave military service. But in those days, when you enlisted, you were paid a certain sum. And so some people now have found that a rich lady paid the sum back to the army, so he was allowed to leave the Austrian army. Not quite sure, I didn't have time to verify this, but just for you to know, there might be a personal relationship to the story, as we will see in our opera. These slides we can all kind of skip. This is maybe of interest. So Richard Wagner, he didn't like to bother with anybody else's work. He was actually in early young years a conductor, and wasn't quite happy when he had to conduct other people's work. When he had the first successes, he right away started really to push conducting his own works. So this idea of Bayreuth, which crystallized itself decades later, really was very much from the beginning. 1840 is when pretty much we see Richard Wagner just returning, I believe, from Paris. And Paris was a very tough experience for Richard Wagner. Liszt, who became in the future years the father-in-law of Richard Wagner, who was very famous and successful in Paris, advised Richard Wagner, why don't you just do some piano arrangements of some orchestral works or operas? That was very popular to do in those days because nobody had record players, and most of the popular operas, you cannot believe how many different instrumental versions there are, for example, of the Barber of Seville. I'm a classical guitarist, so I know already quite a few guitar composers who wrote really opera transcriptions which you could play on the classical guitar. So you could enjoy these glorious arias of the Barber of Seville really with your own instrument. My brother-in-law, Pepe Romero, he actually recorded a few years ago with on the Philips label a recording, the guitar and opera. And it's there's one composer, Giuliani, who wrote Rossinianas. So Rossini, Rossinianas. So of course, 1, 2, 3 Rossinianas, and you hear one beautiful Rossini theme after the other. Often those were variation works where you had a famous aria and then the composer would variate it. So altogether, very popular thing to do in those days. You were able to make actually a fairly good living with those, and Richard Wagner point blank just refused it. So I was very surprised to find that he did arrange Les Yeux d'Amour as a solo piano work, because he usually did not even bother to do those things. Gilbert, yeah, he had his own take on this particular work and play. And then New York City Opera also had its own idea about the stage setting and set it in a golf resort. I wonder how this looks. I'm still, by the way, so sad that the New York City Opera doesn't anymore exist. So it's quite tragic in my opinion. Oh, Olga, there, I see now that you did mention one of the popular operas is, yes, Carmen. Sorry, I didn't see this earlier. The production you will see, we have been looking in class, is this particular one with Rolando Villazón. We just saw with this one little glimpse. This was the setting of the first act. We saw Diego Flores, and these are all images, this one, and actually all the pictures around are now pictures the net has put on the web to show the new production. So it's going to be quite a different Anna Netrebko because she had a child in between. The DVD was taken in 2006, so these are 6 years later. She has gained quite a bit weight, but we will see if she still has the great canto quality. I did put on some of the slides also the reviews, so there are actually very rating, and especially also they like the tenor singing. Before we are going to listen now to more music, and it's going to be just the rest of our session, I want to really show you when we listen to music, especially when we compare different singers and their different interpretations, what do we really look for? I don't know, do you have any comments or idea? What do you listen for? How do you decide that you like a certain singer or not? What really are the things you really dislike in an opera singer? Or what do you like? So what's important to you? Hello?
Oh, there was a question.
Oh, so you're just thinking. I know, I got you by surprise. Sorry. So I was wondering if when you're listening to, you go to the San Diego Opera, what's important to you in an opera singer? What makes it to you enjoyable? Or what is, for example, for me, when I hear a singer who has too much vibrato, and that's often for me, so to say, a turn off where I'm just, the singer loses me, so to say. But what really is important to you when you listen to opera singers? Olga, so you like a subtle expression of emotion that I can identify. So you don't like, yeah, I agree with you. There are some opera singers who are just overplaying almost a little bit, too exaggerated, and make it almost a little bit too artificial. And yeah. So Anna Netrebko in one interview said this, that less is often better, and that she comes from a very old training from the Mariinsky Theater, where that was very much enforced. So yeah, I agree with you on that. But any other comments? Well, let me quick give you a list I put together. We have done this actually one time together in class, and I'm sure it's not a complete list. But here is when we are now listening to the same aria several times and we hear different elements, just start typing in the chat window, and then or later after it's stopped we can quick discuss. But altogether, we want to, of course, a beautiful voice, the color. We don't want some voices have a nasty quality to them. They have a certain sharpness, or we don't maybe appreciate, or too nasal sound. So there are different timbres we maybe appreciate more or less. We have, especially in their canto, we have incredible wide range, big jumps from low notes, immediately jumping to a high note. And that makes it very hard for a singer. They need a lot of technique. They need to be able to quickly jump, smooth. And we do want, of course, the same beauty of sound in all the different what we call registers. Intonation, well, sometimes we are forgiving. To Maria Callas we were. She didn't hit all the time the notes right, but she had such a beauty of interpretation and voice that we forgave her for those sometimes infrequent blots in intonation. I already mentioned vibrato. In bel canto also very important, the breath control. Diction, I don't know, like Joan Sutherland didn't have a great diction, and we didn't mind. But we sometimes, in certain works, it seems more important than in others. Articulation, and that's also actually in an opera buffa like this one important. There are a lot of quite virtuous works, and you can add much more crispiness to an interpretation by interesting articulation. Articulation is to sing legato or staccato, so those are the articulations. Clarity, transparency. There are some singers, they have a fast scale and you hear the bottom note and the high note, and everything in the middle is kind of a little wishy-washy, so to say, and we do want a clarity that we hear every single note crystal clear. We have increasingly grown picky about the acting and phrasing. Didn't matter so much even just 20 years ago. Pavarotti, if you remember, he just stood there and sang, and if he sang a beautiful aria, everybody was happy. Then what many people, we focus so much on the story and the singers, we keep forgetting the orchestra. You will see huge differences in a second about these different singers. So we do want to see that it's beautifully together, the ensemble between the singer and the orchestra. Are they really supporting the singer? Are they overpowering? How are different instruments brought more to the foreground? You will hear quite their difference. How's the tempo? You will also see the big differences in tempi. And then the visual aspect, well, we cannot judge on that one because not all the versions I'm going to play for you are always visual with video. But, well, let me show you. The one aria I want to show you now is really Una Furtiva Lacrima. It's an aria I'm sure if when you hear it, you know it. And just with this list in mind, roughly, think about, I'm going to play one version complete, and then the other ones I'm just maybe not complete, but just the beginning of each interpretation. And then we just plot down maybe what's similar, what's different, what we like better, what we like less. So here is the first version. Enjoy.
All guests have been muted. All guests have been unmuted.
Claudia,
Yes.
what an unbelievable performances. I mean, the choices that you took, it's fabulous.
Oh, it's a lot of fun when you start comparing. We cannot do it all the time because not every opera you can find that many recordings. We could have gone a whole other hour. And later on you get so busy you don't even know anymore. But really it's fascinating to you think it's the same aria, it's very well written down by the composer, but there's what a wide range of possibilities really. So which one was your favorite, Pili? Did you have a favorite?
Pavarotti.
Pavarotti.
Yes. But I had a question about, well, I don't know because I like so many, but Pavarotti somehow. One question about Diego Flores. He sang 2 times, the second, second choice, and then the fourth. And I like the fourth much better. Why? I don't remember why. I could not compare one next to another.
Yeah, that's also, I actually put on purpose on the slide you will find, and you can search yourself. I mean, with 91 recordings of l'Élysée d'Amour, I'm sure you can find 10 more recordings of this aria, especially this one. But it's really sometimes the conductor. You know, you work with a different conductor, you decide together on a different tempo. Maybe the conductor suddenly just takes a different tempo, and the conductor is the one who starts. So the singer has to go with whatever the conductor has established, or sometimes we had just a piano arrangement. So it's really, maybe the conductor is nervous and takes the tempo slightly faster than in rehearsal. So there's so many other factors coming in, and that's what's this exciting part about live performances. When everything falls in the right place, it's just, there's nothing more divine, and it's just glorious. And I see, Olga, you just said, wonderful way for us to learn to appreciate the music and the interpretations. Yes, yeah, and I agree with you. Pavarotti just sings so, I mean, doesn't seem he has any effort. If we would have seen Björling in a better recordings, there's sometimes, maybe if I searched more, I would have been able to find a video in a younger recording. Also, Björling was known to hit those beautiful notes and incredible breath control. Di Stefano was gorgeous too. I had also Placido Domingo, of course, recorded it too, and it's glorious. So they're all great. Yeah. Personally, I don't know. Everybody's so crazy about Diego Flores, and he has this quality in his voice. I just cannot get warm towards his timbre, so to say. He has sometimes a very go ahead.
No, I said yes, you're right, totally right. I was just surprised why I liked the same person one time, the second time better than the first one. I don't know why.
Well, also these poor singers are human. They have better nights than others. So that's true too. So, and it might even change over the years also the interpretation. That's why we have, I showed in class now Anna Netrebko in the 2006 performance, and they talk so much how much her voice has changed. And we in our Lent class are actually going to look at, when many of the students are going to Saturday's performance, is it really true? Has her voice really changed so much? Or is she taking the part also different twist, because she's known to change her interpretations, you know, so just because she enjoys the playfulness of it. Yeah, so as you can see, it's fascinating. My family, they do that with classical guitars, and once they start, they don't stop. Well, anyway, I thank you all for joining, and I have to say good night for tonight. I have to make a call, international call. But I hope you enjoyed this, and we will continue, of course, another time. Don't forget to check the slides on YouTube. There's much more material you can explore and enjoy. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. There was a wonderful treat. Wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Hello, you have reached the Ramirez. Please leave your message